Flight 217 from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles was cruising smoothly at 37,000 feet. The cabin filled with the usual mix of business travelers, families, and military personnel. In seat 23C sat a man in his early 60s, unremarkable in his khaki pants and navy blue polo shirt, reading a Tom Clancy novel with reading glasses perched on his nose. Nothing about him suggested he was anything more than another tired passenger on a cross-country flight. 4 rows ahead sat 3 young Air Force pilots in their service dress uniforms, returning from a Pentagon ceremony. Captain Jake Morrison, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, and Lieutenant Marcus Webb were F-35 Lightning II pilots from the 388th Fighter Wing, and they weren't shy about letting everyone know it. Their conversation carried through the cabin. Stories of training exercises and the cutting-edge technology of the world's most advanced fighter jet. If you're wondering where this story goes, hit that like button and comment if you believe some people carry their legends quietly. "There's nothing like sitting in that cockpit," Morrison said loudly. 5th-generation fighter, stealth capabilities, sensor fusion that's basically magic. "We're flying aircraft that would have been science fiction 20 years ago," Chun added. "The old-timers always talk about their F-4 South and F-15S like they were something special. But honestly, those birds are dinosaurs compared to what we're flying now." The man in 23C turned a page in his book, a slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth. He'd heard this kind of talk before from young pilots who thought the latest technology made them invincible. He went back to his novel, content to remain anonymous. 30 minutes later, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez. We're experiencing some communication issues with air traffic control. We may be adjusting our route slightly due to unexpected military traffic in our airspace. Everything is fine, just routine precautions." The plane's communication system suddenly crackled to life over the cabin speakers, an apparent malfunction that allowed passengers to hear radio traffic. A professional voice came through. "Commercial Flight 217, this is Nellis Control. We have 4 F-35s that need to escort you around the exercise airspace." Then another voice, younger, confident. "Nellis Control, this is Viper Flight. We have visual on the commercial traffic. Moving into escort formation now." Through the windows, passengers began pointing excitedly. 4 F-35 fighters materialized from the clouds, 2 on each side, flying in perfect formation with the airliner. The 3 Air Force pilots practically pressed their faces to the windows. Now, before we continue, if this story has you captivated, please subscribe and turn on notifications. What happens next will blow your mind. The man in 23C pressed his call button. When the flight attendant arrived, he quietly asked, "Would it be possible to speak with the captain?" "Tell him it's regarding the radio communication situation." A minute later, she returned with Captain Rodriguez, who looked curious and concerned. The man spoke quietly. "Captain, I know your comms are acting up, and I know those 35 pilots can hear your radio traffic. With your permission, I'd like to send a message to those escort fighters." Rodriguez looked skeptical. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but military communications require proper authentication. I can't just let a passenger." The man pulled out his wallet and showed Rodriguez something that made the pilot's eyes widen dramatically. "Captain, I understand your concerns, but I think those young pilots out there would benefit from knowing who's on this flight." Rodriguez nodded slowly, clearly shocked, and led the man toward the cockpit. A moment later, a voice came over the radio that made every military aviation enthusiast sit up straight. It was calm, measured, with the distinctive cadence of thousands of hours in a fighter cockpit. "Nellis Control, this is UGLY-6. How copy?" The call sign hit like a thunderbolt. Ugly 6 was legendary in Air Force history, the call sign of General Thomas Hammer Caldwell, the man who revolutionized fighter tactics in the 1990s, who flown combat missions in 3 different wars, who commanded entire air campaigns. He'd retired 5 years ago as a 4-star general, and his call sign was still spoken with reverence. The response from Nellis Control came with barely concealed shock. UGLY6. This is Nellis Control. Authentication codes match. Sir, we had no idea you were aboard that flight. The general's voice remained calm. No reason you should have, son. I'm just a passenger trying to get to Los Angeles. But since my ride seems to have picked up an escort, I thought I'd say hello. Viper Flight, this is Ugly 6. You boys are flying nice and tight out there. Good formation discipline. Inside the cabin, the 3 Air Force pilots had gone pale. They were staring at the back of the head of the man in 23C, the man they'd been sitting near for 2 hours while bragging about their own accomplishments. The man who'd been reading a Tom Clancy novel. The man who was Ugly 6, a living legend who probably forgot more about fighter tactics than they'd ever learn. Viper Flight Lead responded, significantly more professional now. UGLY6, this is Viper Lead. Sir, it's an honor to be sharing airspace with you. We'll maintain escort until you're clear of the exercise area. The general responded, appreciated, Viper Lead. Your formation looks sharp. When you get back to base, tell your squadron commander that UGLY6 says you're doing him proud. Then the general's voice took on a teaching tone. Viper Flight, I've been listening to your radio chatter during this escort. You're confident, skilled, and flying the most advanced fighter jet ever built. But remember something. Technology is wonderful, but it doesn't replace judgment, experience, or humility. The F-35 is incredible, but it's still just a tool. The real weapon is the pilot. And the best pilots I ever knew were the ones who understood that there's always more to learn, always someone better, always room to improve. There was a brief pause, then Viper Lead responded, his voice subdued. Yes, sir. We'll remember that. The F-35s maintained formation for another 10 minutes, then peeled away. Ugly 6, Viper Flight is returning to station. Safe travels, sir. And thank you for the reminder. The general's response was warm. Blue skies and tailwinds, Viper Flight. Ugly 6 out. When General Caldwell returned to his seat, the 3 Air Force pilots were standing in the aisle waiting for him. Morrison, who'd been the loudest earlier, now looked genuinely humbled. General Caldwell, sir, we had no idea. We apologize if anything we said was disrespectful to previous generations of pilots. The general smiled gently. At ease, Captain. You didn't say anything wrong. You're proud of your aircraft and your skills. That's exactly what you should be. He gestured for them to sit nearby. I flew F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam, F-15 Eagles in Desert Storm, and F-22 Raptors before I retired. Every generation of pilots thought their aircraft was the ultimate weapon. And every generation learned that combat is unpredictable, that the enemy adapts, and that survival depends more on the pilot's brain than the aircraft's capabilities. Your F-35 is magnificent. But remember, somewhere out there is a pilot in an older aircraft with more experience and better tactics who could still give you the fight of your life. Stay humble, keep learning, and never stop respecting those who came before you. The pilots nodded, the lesson clearly received. Chun asked, Sir, would you be willing to talk with our squadron sometime? Share some of your experiences? The general smiled warmly. I'd be honored. Send me the details through channels, and we'll set something up. But right now, I've got about 3 hours left on this flight, and a really good Tom Clancy novel to finish. This story reminds us that true greatness doesn't need to announce itself, that legends often walk among us unrecognized, and that the loudest voices in the room are rarely the most experienced. It reminds us to approach every person with respect, to recognize that everyone has a story, and that humility is the mark of true expertise. If this touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs this reminder. Drop a comment about a time someone surprised you with their hidden accomplishments. Let's honor those who served and achieved greatness while remaining humble. Thank you for watching. And remember, the quiet person next to you might just be a legend,